All right, we're in for week 3. My honor to walk through with you some of the highlights of what we're going to discuss in your gospel communities. Again, you're existing to be a gospel-centered missional family of disciples making disciples. We preach, we sing, and we do a lot of things like that when we gather as a whole church. But then the scripture also calls us to these one another's and to help each other grow. And it means so much to me personally, and I know it's beautiful to the Lord that you're committing relationally to one another to be this kind of family, and what an awesome thing. So thanks, and especially that you'd be willing to talk about something so vulnerable and difficult as how we honor Jesus with our finances. Today we're going to be talking about a really long narrative over several chapters in the book of Genesis with Abraham, and he had this promise to Abraham that he would have a son, and that through this son, basically the whole world's going to be saved. Which now, whenever we widen out the lens in the New Testament, we see that did happen through Jesus. So it's a long narrative, I guess the whole Bible, but really, especially in Genesis. But it really comes to a head when God calls him to say, hey, be willing to sacrifice your only son, the one that all of these promises, in addition to loving this son like we would all love our children if you have kids, that and on top of that like the world's salvation hung in the balance. So that was asking a lot, and I think there's a couple of things that I would like for you to focus on. There's a lot of discussion questions that are here, by the way. A shout out to Jared Harper for putting a lot of these questions together. Really appreciate his leadership in our gospel communities. You ought to tell him thanks when you see him. A couple of things I would like to especially highlight while you're talking about this. Before you dive into Genesis, I think it'd be a really interesting question just to talk about testing, and just to talk about, even outside of the area of spirituality, what are the areas that you can tend to be tested on, and the areas that are challenges. And I think that you're going to understand there is a category for testing, and kind of seeing where you're at with things. You have experienced that in your life, and at a certain level, that's what Abraham was going through here. God was testing the sincerity of his faith. But the real heart of this, after you look at the scripture, that I think it'll be great for you to get into, is a question that to me is a real challenge, and a question of what is not on the table is a really interesting question to ask when it relates to your faith in Jesus, your walk as a disciple in Jesus. And I think the temptation is going to be, as we look at Genesis 17 through 22, that the temptation is going to be that I'll give him this and I'll give him this, but I'm not going to trust you with this thing here. I'm going to hold on to that. And I think it'd be really great for you to have an honest discussion with one another about what are the things for you that are maybe easier for you to trust the Lord with, and what are the things that you just hold on to, that your knuckles get white and you're holding on, that it's just so hard for you to do that. For me, things that are really hard would be things that relate to my family, that sometimes with me, I'm able to entrust my future to the Lord, but sometimes what I'll even communicate to God, I think, through actions as well as my words and prayer, is that, yeah, Lord, my children are yours, provided that they are really healthy and that they excel at everything they put their hands to, and provided that they don't really ever have any major heartbreaks, that no girls out there hurt their feelings or reject them, and provided that they go ball out when they play, and all that provided that they ace all their tests, and that they do really well, and they get high-paying jobs, and that they're really emotionally happy and well-adjusted as they launch into adulthood, as they transition into adolescence and through it and out, and that it's really hard for me to really say, well, Lord, I know that how I had to grow is through hard times, and I'm going to entrust my children to you even when they fail, or even when they struggle, or even when life doesn't turn out for them like you want. And that may be an example that for many of you that you can relate to, but then especially in relation to money, is that are we holding on to stored resources, things that money that we've accumulated for retirement, or maybe an inheritance that we had, and that represents why everything's going to be okay in the future, and that we haven't even considered. Some of the most humbling things that I've heard over the last few months have been in discussing this whole topic with people, or some folks that are in even financially, I wouldn't say vulnerable spots, but they're not like super well set for life or anything, that have begun to ask the question, well, what about my retirement, or a chunk of the retirement? Do I need to offer that to the Lord And what a beautiful question that is even just being willing to say, Lord, it's all yours. And you probably aren't going to ask me to give all of it, but are we even willing to put those things on the table? And that was what's so beautiful about Abraham, is that, I mean, the most valuable thing in his world went there. The Lord did not ask him in that case to sacrifice it, although he did with his only son. That's that beautiful point of the gospel of what God gave. He didn't withhold anything for our benefit. But what are those things that you're prone to hold on to? You guys talk that through, and I think this will be a really valuable contribution to one another's growth, just to say, hey, here's where that's hard, and I bet you're going to find a lot of common ground on that, and even future conversations you can hold each other accountable to giving it all to Jesus in every way.